guys, so to start off this Black Widow look, I first made up a little design of kind of what I wanted the collar piece to look like. I knew I wanted to do some cool spider legs, so I drew that up, so I kind of had an idea of what I was going to do. Then I'm just finding the center of my chest and using one of the NYX micro brow pencils to sketch out the hourglass. I then started sketching out the legs, and for these, the top parts, I curved the lines in and then back out into sort of a rounded knee joint, and then for the bottom parts, they're more like a claw with a point at the end. And I did start out using the NYX brow pencil for the legs, but this is a rather hard pencil, which I do really like for sketching things out. But for this specific look, as I started sketching out the legs, I felt like I needed something that was a bit more free and creamy. So I decided to switch to the NYX Jumbo Eye Pencil in the shade Black Bean. And at this point, these lines don't need to be perfect. I decided to actually later fill these in with the Black Bean and use that as a base. But feel free to use whatever products that you're comfortable with for this, whether it be an eyeliner or even a water activated body paint. I decided to use this jumbo pencil because it is really creamy and super easy to wipe away. These legs were quite the process to figure out how I wanted them to be situated and everything, but having the sketch was really nice because I had a little bit of an idea, but as you'll see, I have to go in quite a bit to modify the shapes or change how long certain parts of the legs are. So definitely play around with it a bit on yourself and see what you like. Here you can see where I wanted to change a couple things, so I'm just drawing in my new shape and then using a makeup wipe to wipe away any other pieces. I also needed to go back in and redefine my hourglass shape, and then this is when I decided to fill in all of the legs using that jumbo pencil. Then once I had everything filled in, I went in with a Q-tip that had some makeup remover on it to just clean up some of the edges. And now, since this is a super creamy product, we want to set the heck out of it, or it's going to smudge onto everything that it touches. So I'm just using some of my Ben Nye Neutral Set, which is a colorless powder, and I am just packing that all over top of the black, making sure to really press it in. And then I'm using a big powder brush to brush away the excess. Now I'm filling in the hourglass shape using a red water activated body paint. Once I've done that, I'm going in with a black water activated body paint on a detail brush to start outlining the hourglass. Also, don't forget to outline any leg pieces that you have crossing over. Then I'm adding a little bit more of that paint around the inside edges and taking a pencil brush to blend that inward, starting to add some shading and dimension to the hourglass. And I'm just going to continue that around the entire shape. To highlight, I'm using a pinky kind of salmon cream color, and I'm stippling that to the center areas of the hourglass, focusing the most product at the very center and then blending it out. Then I forgot to add the shading underneath the pieces of the leg that are crossing over, so I'm just taking the black body paint again and blending it out with the pencil brush. Then going back in with my highlight color, since the shading did tone it down a little bit. Now to start adding some highlights to the legs, I'm starting with a white cream makeup. This one is from Mehron, and I'm just using like an eyeshadow crease brush to stipple that on and blend it out. I'm focusing this on the areas that I want to pop out more, especially all the little knobby knee joints. And for the most part anyway, I'm highlighting as if my light source were up above me so that the tops of the legs would have the most highlight. But I'm also just kind of doing what looks good to my eye as well. Now I'm going to set that cream highlight in place using a matte white eyeshadow and then a kind of orange toned bright red eyeshadow to set the highlight of the hourglass. I'm starting by stippling this on to really focus the pigment toward the center of my highlights and then blending it out. And I'm not going for a super perfect blend here. I do want to kind of keep some texture and roughness to it. Also, don't worry about if you happen to go a little bit overboard with this step, because we are going to go back in a little bit and add some shadows. Same process with the red eyeshadow, focusing that toward the center and then blending it out toward the edges. Next, I'm using a warm medium brown shade, and we're going to start adding some shading around the legs. We want these to look like they're not just sitting flat on our skin, so we do want to shade around the entire leg a little bit, but I do want to add more of a shadow underneath, again as if our light source were above us. And depending on how close or how far away from your skin you want the legs to appear, you're going to want to add some space between the shadow and the leg. Less space if you want it closer to your skin, and more space if you want it further away. I'm also adding shading where the legs meet and or cross over. Even though I don't have the legs actually meeting on my right shoulder, I still wanted to add some shading from the back of the shoulders coming forward. Now I'm going in with a darker brown eyeshadow to deepen some of the shading, especially focusing on where the legs meet and cross over. I'm then taking a clean blending brush to help blend out the edges. Then I also decided to add more shading around the shoulders and down the arms a little bit, just to kind of bring it all together. And I'm using both the dark brown as well as a matte black eyeshadow for this. So this is where we're at so far, and you could stop at this point if you wanted to, but I decided to go in with a black body paint again on a detail brush to add a bit more contrast and really define the shapes of those legs. So this is the same idea as when we added the shading with the black body paint to the inside edges of the hourglass. So I'm adding the black paint to the general area that I want to add the shading, and then I'm going in with a pencil brush to blend it out. I'm also using this black to define and sharpen all of the edges around the legs. I'm doing this in small sections so that I can blend out the body paint while it's still a little bit wet. I'm also using the detail brush to start adding some lines that go onto the highlighted areas of the leg to add a little bit more of a textured look. We want to make sure that we blend in from our edges so we can start creating a more rounded, three-dimensional shape to the leg. When we're adding the lines for texture, these don't need to be even in darkness or in thickness. And a lot of the time I would go in with just the leftover paint on my brush for some of those lines, and that's going to help add even more dimension as well. And now with a white water activated body paint, we're going to use this as an even more intense highlight. And on another small detail brush, I'm first stippling that on to the joint area and just lightly tapping to blend that out a little bit with my finger. And then like we added those lines with the black body paint, we're going to do the same thing with the white. And I don't want to blend these out too much, but I am going to just lightly run my finger over in the direction of the paint stroke to blend out the edges a little bit, and I'm going to do that same exact process for the rest of the legs. So you can really tell what a huge difference that made to add in the black and white body paints to define our shapes more. And I decided after I did those legs that I wanted to add that white body paint where the legs crossed over. Since it is black on black, even though you wouldn't really have a highlight under there, I decided to add it in there just so the legs popped out and separated a little bit more. And I forgot to mention that I added some black shading coming from the back of the shoulders forward, so you can see that here, and this is the finished spider leg collar. Finally, moving on to the face, I have my brows blocked and my base, my usual Kat Von D Lock-It foundation, and the Ben Nye Neutral Set powder. I'm starting out with my contour, and for that I'm using that same warm brown shade that we used earlier, as well as a matte black. And starting with the brown, I am applying that around the sides of my face and then blending that down along my cheekbones as well as up onto my forehead. I'm adding a little bit just under my lower lip, as well as along the sides and bottom of my nose, and along my jawline and under my chin. Once I've got that base down, I'm going in and covering those same areas using the black eyeshadow. You can see at times that I use more of a stippling blending motion to get more of a rough, kind of grungy texture like we did down on the spider legs. I then decided to add a little bit of a soft widow's peak down onto the forehead, and at this point I was kind of feeling a little bit like a werewolf, but I just went with it. Down on the cheek contours, I wanted to hollow them out a little bit more, so I'm blending in kind of toward my nose and then down toward the corners of my mouth. I wanted to add some color to this, so I'm taking a bright red eyeshadow and just blending that over top of the black just along the cheek contours. I went a little bit overboard on my right cheek, so I'm just taking some of my foundation and applying that underneath and blending it up into the contour. I'm adding more of that red shadow on top, and then I'm taking more of an orange toned red and applying it over the top of that. Then I wanted to black out my hairline, so I'm just taking some of my black eyeshadow and applying that heavily along the hairline and blending it back into the hair as well as onto our previous shadows. I also decided to add a little bit of shading with this black onto the ears. Moving on to the spider eyes, I'm starting out with a black body paint on a detail brush, and I am first dotting where I want the pupil of each eye to be. You can place your eyes in whatever formation that you want to. I did do a sketch for this part as well, so I kind of had an idea of where I wanted to place the pupils. And then for the actual eyes, I'm using Jeffree Star's Anna Nicole liquid lipstick. It's kind of an orange toned red, and I chose this because it was pretty close to the color of my contacts. So I'm going to be taking this also on a small detail brush so I can start out small and build up the shape. I wasn't quite sure yet what size or exact shape that I wanted to make the eyes, and I always think just in general it's a good idea to start out smaller so you can build up your shapes, because it's usually easier to apply more than to take away. So you can see here that I started out super small, and then I decided to make it bigger and a little bit closer to the size of my eyes. And the shape that I decided to go with was pretty close to a natural eye shape, but compared to mine, just a little bit more rounded and open. To help keep my hands steady when I want to hold a mirror closer to my face as well, I hold the mirror and put my thumb out and place my working hand on that thumb so that I can keep it a little bit more steady. Then once I was pretty happy with those top two eyes, I went in and really defined the shape of the pupil and made it closer to the size of my own. Before I did the lower eyes, I put in my red Scleras from Samhain, and then I just continued on. And as I was moving along, since I knew more of the shape and size that I wanted, I didn't have to start out so small and work my way up. But figuring out the exact shape was kind of a process, because as I would move on to the next eye and the next eye, I would find myself liking aspects of that eye more than the previous eye. But you kind of figure it out as you go along, and it all evens itself out. They don't have to be exactly perfect. I don't know if that's possible, but just do your best. Then once I was happy with all of my eye shapes, I went in with a dark brown eyeshadow on a really fine, this one's actually a tiny paintbrush from the art supply store, and I'm adding just a little bit of shading along the inside edge of each eye. And I'm making that shadow a little bit darker at each of the corners. And this is going to help us start adding some dimension to each of the eyes. Once I've done that, I'm going back in with the brush that I had my base eye color on, and I'm just going to blend that back into the brown to soften the lines where I need to. Now, going back to the black body paint on that fine detail brush, I am just taking a super thin line around each of the eyes. Then with the leftover product I have on my brush, I am adding some more shading to each of the corners. Don't forget to take a deep breath between each of these eyes, because it's a freaking challenge. But for me, I found it easiest to work from each of the corners in toward the center, for the most part using short strokes rather than one long stroke. And also don't forget that up to this point, all the shading that we've done on the eyes has been around the inside edges and toward the pupil rather than around the outside. Then again, like we did after the brown shading, we're taking the brush that had our base eye color on it, and we're blending that along the inside edges to kind of blend that black line in to create more of a shadow. Then to highlight the eyes, I'm taking that same pinky salmon color that we used to highlight the hourglass, and I'm applying that very lightly around the pupil and then kind of blending it out just by stippling with my finger, and then applying some of that red-orange eyeshadow over top. Then once we've done the highlight, I'm going back in with the black body paint to redefine the pupils. Now we're going to start adding some dimension around the eyes, and to do this I'm starting out with my foundation shade, but you could also use a shade or two lighter for this, and I'm just taking that on a small concealer brush and applying that around the outside edges of each eye. And this is also going to help us out if we needed to clean up any of those black edges. Going back to that first contour shade that we used on a flat eyeliner brush, and I'm lining that around the top and bottom of each eye, leaving a little gap between the line and the eye so that once we shade and blend this line out a little bit, the skin around those areas will appear to be a bit raised. I'm also not lining around the corners of each eye, just around the top and the bottom, blending it out toward the corners. I'm taking that small concealer brush that has the leftover foundation on it, and I'm just using that to blend the lines out a little bit. Then once we've lined around each of the eyes, I'm going back in with that teeny tiny paintbrush and a little bit of the dark brown eyeshadow, and I'm focusing that toward the center of those lines, again blending it out. This is going to add a little bit deeper of a shadow to that fold in the skin. We also want to blend this out a little bit, focusing at the center just to soften that line up so it's not so sharp. And then if you need to lighten anything up at all, just take that same concealer brush with your foundation color and gently blend over top of the lines. So this is what the spider eyes look like complete, and now we're going to move on to our own eyes, and we're going to kind of mimic the shading that we did around the spider eyes onto our eyes. So I'm starting out with that lighter contour shade that we used, and I'm blending this into the crease, and then I switched to a smaller brush so I could get more of a defined shape, and then we're going to apply that same color underneath the eyes, again leaving a little gap there like we did on the spider eyes. Then we're going in with that darker brown eyeshadow, again applying that into the crease but focusing it more toward the center and blending out. And then same thing under the eyes. Then I'm taking a clean blending brush and just blending around the edges of that eyeshadow. Then I felt like I needed something a little bit more, so I'm taking that lighter contour shade again and applying that to the top of the nose contour and kind of blending it down the sides of the nose a little bit. And then over top of that, I added the red eyeshadow. I'm not blending this all the way into our other eyeshadow, but I am going to apply it to the lower lash line from the inner corner about a third of the way in, and then just blending that down toward the spider eyes. I decided to take just a little bit of that red eyeshadow and blend it around the outside edges of the eyeshadow that we blended into the crease, and then I'm taking a blending brush again to just soften up the edges. And then while I was major struggling deciding on what I wanted to do with the lips, I went in with a black liner and lined all around the waterline, and I took it onto the lash line a bit as well, and then just smudged it out with my finger a little bit, both on top and bottom. Then on the lower waterline, I'm setting that in place with a little bit of matte black eyeshadow. And that's going to do it for the eyes. If you want to, you can also add some mascara, but I decided not to. And I was still struggling on deciding what to do with the lips. In the end, I decided to first cover them with a little bit of my foundation. Then I went in with a matte black eyeshadow on a blending brush, and I started by applying this to the very center of the lips. We want to focus most of the color there and then blend it out so we have a nice soft fade onto the rest of the lips. And then I decided that I wanted to take it up a little bit on the top lip, just toward the center of the Cupid's bow. Then once we're done with the lips, that's gonna do it for this Black Widow inspired look. So I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I had a ton of fun with this one. I know there was kind of a lot of information in this video, but I hope it was helpful to you guys and gives you a little bit of inspiration for Halloween. If you did enjoy this, feel free to subscribe for more Halloween videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.